Thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar, and we look forward to having a fruitful discussion and a good time together as well. Welcome to AVPA, and looking forward to the next 1.5 hours or so. So thank you very much, and over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you everyone for making time to join us today on what is a very pivotal and important conversation that doesn't get the attention it deserves. So as we go into the next decade where gender lens investing takes on even more significance than it ever has, we welcome the panel today, and we're very thankful to the speakers for making time to contribute and share with us their experience and knowledge in this space. So to my next slide, Abu, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of AVPA. I'm Kenyan based in Johannesburg. And this gender conversation is a really major part of what AVP will be spending time on. Firstly, because I think the COVID crisis has brought the gender conversation a lot more to the forefront. Women have been disproportionately more affected through the COVID crisis than men were. And secondly, in the bigger context of looking at how we recover from the COVID crisis, the SME sector is in need of huge support as it forms a key part of the African economic machinery. By way of introduction, for those of you who don't know about us, AVPA is an investor-only network that aims to bring together providers of financial, human, and intellectual capital to collaborate towards deploying more resources for impact on the continent. So we bring together a whole spectrum of investors, from foundations to NGOs, aid agencies. Our financial investors play along what we call the continuum of capital, deploying grants, debt, or equity. And that's very important because, as we know, we don't have enough capital in the social sector to fund our needs. And so we need to see how we can tap in the private sector. So it's critically important for us to see how we can blend not just resources, but also capital that's available between the development and private sector. We're on the bottom right, you'll see we are also part of an international sister network of organizations that includes networks in Asia, Europe, and Latin America. And that's important because one of the things we intend to do is increase, for example, South-to-South collaboration. The Asians are doing a lot of work in the gender space, so we'll be looking to collaborate with them as well as we go forward. Next slide. And AVPA aims to accelerate Africa's learning through increased collaboration from other regions. We are headquartered in Nairobi. We have offices in Johannesburg and Lagos. Next slide. We'll also be potentially looking at Francophone and North Africa offices in the near future. Our strategic goals are basically around making sure that firstly, Africa understands the problem we're facing of trying to mobilize capital for social investments, and the fact that we can't depend on traditional sources of capital. Aid is reducing to the continent. Our governments who also offer funding to this space are broke. So we've got to think creatively how we're going to mobilize capital. And this conversation today leans to that direction. As part of the solution, after speaking the problem on point one, is how do we get more African social investors astute and competent in innovative finance? So we'll be running a couple of programs in innovative finance and capacitating social investors so they can be more competent in playing in the space that is captured under impact investing, employing blended finance structures, being comfortable with instruments like social impact bonds and loan guarantees, amongst others. Point number 3 speaks to the fact that the most important amongst investors that we have to look into and supporting if we're going to unlock private capital are our grant makers, and how do we champion more catalytic investments coming to this space. And lastly, like we're doing today, is really about connecting social investors to each other. So that's kind of what our objectives are. And once again, we're really grateful to the speakers who made themselves available today. A strong panel of very competent women. Andia Chakava, Investment Director of Grasa Machel Trust. Lillian Ramba, thank you very much from Grassroots Business Fund. Thelma from Nigeria, SME Nigeria, really grateful for you for making time to meet us. And Shiro Aweru Waidaka of FunKids. And Stephen Booth, the only man on the panel today. Thank you so much for stepping up and making sure that we have a very gender balanced or semi-gender balanced panel. So over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Aswani, and welcome everyone. Looking forward to having an interesting conversation, and especially this month as we celebrated International Women's Day. We are celebrating it as a whole month. We want to have a conversation around gender lens investment, and some of the questions we'll be looking at is, what does it mean to invest in women? Okay, why is this good for the economy? Why is this good for business? And especially as we look at Africa as a continent over the last few years, last decade or so, we've seen more and more women getting into executive roles in the corporate space. But also we are seeing more women-funded business being able to scale and becoming and leaving a mark in the economy. So as we start today, we have, like Dr. Aswani said, we have an interesting panel of ladies, both from the development sector and from what we'd call the financial sector. And we also have a voice of an entrepreneur who will be able to share their thoughts, their takeouts, especially when it comes to this journey of funding women in business and financing women entrepreneurs. So as we begin this conversation, feel free to join us. We want to make it a conversation with you. So we want to have you using the chat function. If, as the conversation goes on, feel free to send in your thoughts, send in some questions. If you're sending in a question, please write QN so that we're able to pick it out as a question. And then if it's a question to any of the specific speakers, you can put question QN and then the name of the speaker. What we will do is, after the speakers share their slides and share their conversation, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And we have a team at the back who are helping us look at those questions and collect those questions, okay? So we hope to make this an ongoing conversation about funding women entrepreneurs, not just for today, but also for everyone else and for the rest of the year coming. And as we go on, feel free to introduce yourself on the chat box. Tell us who you are, where you're coming from, which organization you're representing, and probably what's the one thing that you're most excited about when it comes to this space of financing women and entrepreneurs and the broader conversation around gender lens investing. Before we get to our first speaker, just some quick housekeeping. I kindly keep your microphone on mute throughout the session so that we are able to just have one person speaking. And depending on what gadget you're using, whether you're using your laptop or your phone, you can use, on the top right corner of Zoom, there's a feature called View. You can use a speaker view, which will give you the most optimal effect for this conversation as we listen to the different speakers. And like we said, feel free to use the chat box for all comments, thoughts, and any reflection that you pick out from this conversation. So looking forward to an exciting space over the next 1.5 hours. And but before we start, we have a poll question that we would like to share with you, just to get us into the space. So we have a poll question that will be shared on your screen. Just give us a second for that. So Dr. Sonny, we are ready with the poll? Sorry, Dr. Sonny, Nancy, we can share the poll question so that we just want to get some feedback, some thoughts, some reflections for you even as we start. And as we wait for the poll question to pop up on your screen, also on the chat box, feel free to share what's the one thing, what's the one takeout you would like from this conversation today. At the end of the session, when we say we've had an hour engagement, what's the one question you would like answered, or what's the one takeout you'd like for us? Okay. I think we're having a bit of technical.
Yeah, Steve, this is Nancy. I think continue.
So let's just pick up from there. We'll be able to look at the poll question later. The first speaker for us today is Andia Chakava. And Andia is currently the investment director of the Grassroots Trust. And here, this is an organization that I think when I looked at their mission, it speaks to what we're talking about today. And even looking at the greater conversation around financing women in entrepreneurs. So the mission for the Grassroots Trust says that they're here to amplify women's movement, influence governance, and promote women's contribution and leadership in the economic, social, and political development across Africa. And they are here also to advocate for the protection of child's rights and dignity. Andia is passionate about facilitating intra-Africa investment and has got many years in this space. So Andia, I would like to welcome you to speak to the, I'm just looking at how many, we're about 70, 71 of us in the call today. So I'm sure many people are looking forward to hear some of your thoughts and takeouts when it comes to this space. Welcome very much. And
okay, thank you, Steve, for that introduction. If we can go to the next slide. I was asked to speak about how Grassroots Trust is implementing gender lens investing and some of the observations we've seen in COVID and some recommendations for the ecosystem. I will give two core examples. I think there was, we were spoke for choice, but I wanted to pick two that I think would benefit this community, which is really the work that we've been doing around purposeful technical assistance. Now, when you look at the reports that are done on entrepreneurs, even when we talk about the Global Entrepreneurship Report for Women, it highlights that in no region around the world did women rank higher in business confidence than men, and that men are 10% more likely to be undeterred by fear of failure than women. So we basically have a program called Women Creating Wealth that we use to really drive women entrepreneurs' resilience, confidence, and desire to grow their business. Aside from building this community of confidence, as well as allowing women to get to know each other through peer networking, we specifically introduced an investor readiness module as of last year called Know, Find, and Grow Your Money. This allows the women to understand the different investor types, understand what they need to ask for as when they're pitching their particular business, and it also facilitates linkages and access to markets. This year, we're doubling down on that particular initiative, for we will be actually presenting quarterly investor showcases and also taking advantage of the AVPA deal platform that we graciously are registered on. To date, we have graduated about 400 entrepreneurs in Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, and South Africa. The other aspect in gender lens investing is that we are developing a 20 million gender lens investment vehicle to deploy capital to women entrepreneurs, really in East and Southern Africa. And the main aspect of this is really just to ensure that we have women as founder as the core investment strategy, and a secondary criteria, products and services that benefit the female segment. Now, it's hard to talk about investing in women without looking at how women have been affected because of COVID. As Frank told us, the COVID aspect was not gender neutral. We have sectors where women were predominantly operating, whether it was in education, events, hospitality, horticulture, all of which were negatively impacted by COVID. We also have women, the highest number in informal trade, especially around cross borders, and the borders were closed. So what did we see? We actually saw a bit of pivoting, a lot of pivoting amongst these particular women. And I've got two examples that we put in an edutech business and a business in sexual reproductive health that were basically able to change their solutions to serve the market and basically address rising problems in their community. If I focus on the sexual reproductive health one, they basically took the incinerator, which was to destroy or wastage and sanitary pads, and that became a tool to basically remove masks and PPE from our environment. What are some of the learnings we've seen when it comes to COVID? One of the key things is intersectionality matters. When we're talking about women and we're talking about the rise in gender-based violence and we're talking about the burden of care, we have to see that this impacts women investing, impacts how we view investing in women. We also have to see that COVID has also brought all these compliance requirements and has an urgent need for emergency grants as well as working capital support. What are some of the key things that key stakeholders and sector players can do? When we're looking at this, we really feel that the supply side needs more education. We have been involved in basically building the capacity of women entrepreneurs for the last 10 years. Women are highly trained in various programs, but what is lacking is the capital that flows to them. We are asking the community to really view gender disaggregated data and not only look at it holistically, but across different product lines. So for instance, in the banking sector, we're not only interested in the number of women that have accounts, but the number of women that actually have savings accounts, that have actual loans, the size of the loans, and the difference in rejection. We need to incentivize players to provide new innovative models. What are we doing by de-risking the solutions, whether it's through guarantees or actually using movable assets and actually having specific solutions that can address the problem? And the main thing that I'll summarize on is just involving women's voices when designing the products and the solutions, and also accelerating the work that has been done. Now and again, the same women are subjected to new research being done as each player tries to figure out their own strategy. I recommend coming together and working with existing winning groups that are already there. At the end of the day, we need to design initiatives as collaboratively as possible to make sure the capital flows. Right now, we've done a lot of talking, a lot of convening, but the capital is yet to flow. Thank you.
Thank you, Andia. And even as we take some thoughts and takeouts from that, like I said earlier, feel free to, if you have any questions, you can put them on the chat. When we finish with all the speakers, we'll have a Q&A session that will be open to everyone. But Andia, a question to you. You've talked about the impact of capital flow to business women, and especially with the work you've done over the last 10 years. And I think one of the things you've highlighted is the whole space also of the lack of capital access for these women. A question for you, and I'll give you a few minutes just to answer. There's a conversation around the conscious and unconscious bias that has had an impact on capital raising process, especially for African women, and especially also for micro enterprises, who then have a struggle when it comes to the potential and the space to be able to scale. And this is where we say that access to funding then becomes probably a key factor towards giving them the platform on which they're able to scale their business. So question would be, and the question to you is, what can be done from your history, from your experience, what can be done to eradicate this conscious or unconscious bias that has had a negative impact on capital mobilization, especially for women?
I think one of the key things I'd like to point out is that when you're gender neutral, you are gender blind. I think we have to recognize that the capital allocation process is one that has been dominated by males. The financial services industry, and if you go further and you say the investment industry generally has had more males in the decision-making process. So what that happens is that you may not necessarily be looking for gendered specific deal sourcing mechanisms or gendered specific sectors that you can target, or actually counting and going after the women entrepreneurs that might be in your network. I also find that when it comes to the capital allocation, we are used to doing things the way we have done it before. So normally the dominant way of flowing money to enterprises has always been traditionally through the microfinance and banking sector. While that particular stream is quite beneficial, what we will find is that patient capital is not necessarily available. You still come back to the aspect of collateral. you lack flexibility in terms of how these funds are being dispersed. What we find is that if we're able to basically ring fence and have very specific initiatives, and these are decided at the leadership level, which needs a gender balance of about 40 to 60% of male or female's gender, and have a very targeted strategy that acknowledges, first of all, that there are stereotypes and attitudes that have a negative, that may have a perception on what people believe investing in a women's entrepreneur business is. We find that we talk a lot about de-risking, yet we don't say the same about male in business. We say we have a different connotation when women have families and the burden of care, yet when it is male entrepreneurs, it is perceived to actually be responsible and better. We also find when it comes to follow-on capital, this is not necessarily, it doesn't happen for women-owned enterprises. And there's bias, especially when they're dealing with products and services that are very specific to the female segment. So we're talking about people that are addressing solutions that could deal with sexual reproductive health, that could deal with areas around eczema, that could deal with areas around maternity issues. There's a particular set of bias. So what we need to do is to democratize the decision making and start believing in women's future potential and not necessarily the track record, because that is what stumbles a lot of women entrepreneurs from getting the financing.
Thanks, Andia. We are collecting a few questions on the chat, and we'll share some of those towards the end. But a question probably that would have a quick answer for us is, there's been talk about the East and Southern African Fund, the Fund for East and Southern African. Has this been launched? And what can we learn? How can we help women in this platform, in women across Africa, connect to this opportunity?
Thank you for asking that. We're actually fundraising for that initiative now. And I'm not the only one fundraising. There's a bunch of other female fund managers, my colleague Lillian included, that are fundraising for this initiative. So I would say the gender lens investing is gaining momentum, and there are certain female fund managers that have decided to really address this problem by investing in their network, because investing is a function of networks, and we want to support the women that we know and trust, and we believe are bankable and investable.
Thank you, Andia, for this. Even as we talk about networking and having more women access to fund, I'd like to invite our next speaker, and this is Thelma Ekiyor. Thelma is currently the managing partner of SME Nigeria, which is Nigeria's impact investment platform. What I liked, just getting to read through your bio and some of what you're doing, is that you've built an SME Nigeria as an impact investment platform, specifically investing in women and youth-owned business, from micro to medium-sized business. I think when we talk of investment and we talk of funding, many organizations tend to leave out the micro space as we focus on the medium space. And that with your passion, especially on capacity development for entrepreneurs, to make them investment ready. So I'd like to invite you to speak on this space on the question around that will be, so this investment space, what do we do? How do we start? And how are you doing it? Welcome, Thelma.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I must thank Frank, Tony, and the rest of the AVPA team for hosting this panel and inviting me to be a speaker. As you said, SMENG, we designed ourselves to be an impact investment platform that focuses primarily on supporting women entrepreneurs through a gender lens. And we decided to establish a platform rather than just a fund because we conducted, prior to setting up the company, we conducted a research on the actual needs of women entrepreneurs. And we realized that to finance women entrepreneurs, you need to address the capacity deficits that exist that have also fed into this negative stereotyping of women entrepreneurs as being risky. And so we asked ourselves, what makes us a gender lens fund in Nigeria, in Africa at this time, and not anywhere else? How can we respond to the contextual realities of where we're based? And so the platform is designed to, first of all, we have an accelerator called She Works Here that serves as a pipeline feeder to make our businesses investment ready, as you said, and also position them not just to access our financing, but the financing that might be available in the sector. And we did this as a way of ecosystem strengthening, because there are only 4 of us, last count of us in Nigeria, who are intentionally calling ourselves gender lens investors. That means in a country with 200 million people, it means we haven't even scratched the surface. And so strengthening the ecosystem is beneficial to not just ourselves, but to everyone else. We have 2 funds. We have a bottom of the pyramid fund called the AB Fund. And this also points to the reality of where we are. Prior to COVID, Nigeria was listed as the country that had the highest number of people living under the poverty brackets. And if you want to talk about investing in women in Nigeria, and you're not addressing issues of poverty, then you are working outside of the reality. And so we knew that that had to be part of our framework. But we also know that women don't want to remain micro forever. There's a tendency to want to support women with microfinancing, but not want to support them with large financing, almost as if women don't know what to do with a lot of money. And so we've designed our platform in such a way that it is aspirational. Yes, women will start with the AB Fund, but there are pathways for them to then access larger capital. And that is what we have in our Women's Investment Fund. It targets businesses in high growth sectors that are looking to scale, set up new branches, go to different countries, primarily in Africa. And we have invested in a convening space called the funding space, just so actors can come together and we can, support each other. But not only that, we can also explore opportunities for co-investing, collaboration, because none of us has all the capital to do this work alone. COVID obviously changed all our lives. For us, what COVID did was it made us revisit how we wanted to support women. And what was clear, very clear to us, that it couldn't be business as usual. And so we conducted a national survey here in Nigeria in collaboration with the Federal Ministry for Women's Affairs, because obviously only the government can reach women wherever they are. And the survey revealed that because women are not digitally savvy, because women are not positioned to migrate their businesses onto online platforms, it was going to take women entrepreneurs longest to recover from the impact of COVID. The sectors that were shut down for 6 to 8 months are predominantly sectors where women work. And so the recovery process for women will definitely be lengthier. And so in designing, we designed 2 things. The first thing was to design a bridge facility to support the women primarily in our portfolio to recover from the impact of the pandemic. And the facility is 2-pronged. One is grant making, and we secured financing from one of our partners to do this. And another avenue is through patient. And we also have invested, and we're actually launching this next week, in an e-commerce platform that will serve as a mechanism for helping women become active in the digital. If it costs equivalent of $2,000 to set up an e-commerce platform, by and large, most women entrepreneurs in Nigeria cannot afford to do this. And so by creating this platform that gives the women in our portfolio, as well as other women, the capacity to access new markets, it will introduce resiliency into their businesses and help them to mitigate the impact of future shocks. We all pray that COVID does not happen again, but something else unpredictable might happen. And then what happens to the businesses? I think Africa has to be in a position where we can look forward. We can, project and say, how do we position ourselves not to always be the victims of situations, but to actually decide how we steer ourselves through different challenges that occur anywhere in the world. It's not just in Africa that you might have potential economic downturns. And so that's what we do in terms of gender lens investing. Gender lens investing is very much in its formative stages. What has happened is we now have language for what we're trying to do. And I think sometimes we get stuck in the nomenclature and forget that we're talking about people's lives. All gender lens investing is saying, be sensitive to the needs of women and girls as you deploy capital. So it's made a lot of momentum, but in reality, you know, we do not want to get stuck in carrying the framework of saying we are doing gender lens investing, but no money is moving to Africa. And this is happening. I'm happy that AVP and other actors are, you know, hosting panels like this, because we need to check this from the onset. Another point that needs to be made is that, you know, I worked a lot in the development sector as a donor. I worked in different countries. One of the criticisms of the development sector is this cookie cutter method that we use for projects. So projects are designed somewhere else and they're transplanted to another country. If we're not careful, it's going to start happening with gender lens investing, where the trend of people saying, well, you know, why aren't you doing things like Kenya? Why aren't you doing this fund in Ghana? I don't have to do things like the fund in Kenya and Ghana. I have to respond to the needs that I see in Nigeria. And I think, you know, having a conversation with global partners is important to say that in shaping gender lens investing, we have to let people design and have investment theses that make sense for their particular context. Only then can we truly be addressing the needs of the women that we're targeting. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Thelma. And it's interesting when we speak about investing, and especially investing in women. One of the things you've highlighted is the way across Africa, and you've highlighted with statistics from Nigeria, but I believe it's across Africa. Women are disadvantaged when it comes to accessing in funding and in capital, especially. And in this space, even when we look at patient capital, but being in the financial space and being what we call at the top of a financial institution, we say that there are many people who play in this. There are many actors when it comes to spaces and people who are trying to provide support for women-owned businesses, both on the government side and also in the private sector. The question probably for us, and for you, is what are some of your take on how financial institutions can profitably expand services to business owners? When we look at business owners, one of the questions is it a risky space to invest in? Is it profitable? So with your history and with your passion, especially for this space, what are some of the ways financial institutions can profitably expand their services to women?
Thank you so much. I think, you know, we really have to, you know, investigate where this perception started from that says women are risky investment, because, you know, it has permeated the sector and there's no evidence. IFC, different organizations have put out data to say women are actually better at repaying debt. And that's the truth. But somehow what people have become most comfortable about is this idea that women are risky. So they say, you know, the portfolio is risky, and so it deters people from just changing the status quo. And that is exactly what Gender Lens is asking investors to do, is asking investors to put on new lens. It's like changing your glasses, right? You change your glasses, you get to see better. So Gender Lens, essentially a new pair of glasses that allow you to stop seeing things through the lens of patriarchy, because patriarchy is what has governed not just Africa, but as Andy has said, the financial sector. Why should there only be 4 female-led funds in Nigeria? or across the continent, we can count them. It just shows you that not only is it extremely difficult for women to break through, the way it is designed deter women from breaking through. And so we have to put together, I think one of the things that, AVP, and I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of actionable recommendations. One of the things that has to happen is for us to catalog success stories, for us to put together evidence-based data on what is working and how it's working. And so because this is only, we can't ask investors to invest in women because it feels good, touchy-feely. No, you invest in women because it is a good business case, because the returns are attractive. And the IFC said of their portfolio of funds that they've assessed, female-led funds, first-time female-led fund managers actually made up 50% of the funds that had done very, very well. Where is that data? Where are those stories? And I think if those stories are told, and told by men as well, it will help to change this wrong perception that women are risky. The other thing is also how we organize. We've made a lot of progress, but we're still Africans, and so women are still quite conservative in organizing. And I was jokingly saying at a previous panel last week that in Nigeria, men can go to the polo club, the boat club. I don't know what they go to in Kenya or South Africa. There are different places, rugby club. We don't really have a netball club, women, or something that we can all go to. And while we're doing, I know a few friends that have taken up golf, but there has to be something that brings us together. When we come together, we're also doing business. And in that, women are not, not a blanket, but you'll find that, men can get together at night and drink and do business. A woman is thinking, need to go home and sort things out at home. So that is still having to balance all these things makes it impossible for us to do the things that men do and then excel the way that they excel. And if, we have platforms like this that creates networking opportunities for women to share how they can do, how they invest, learn from other people. I don't want to be doing this conversation again in 10 years with you, Steve, with another set of women talking about how it's so difficult to do gender lens investing. That we should all be dedicated not to have this cycle repeat itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Thelma. And we'd like to just pick up on what Thelma has shared. And here we have about 81 of us who come from different spaces, different countries. From our last check, we got representation from almost 10, 11 different countries. Across Africa, we've got representation from the UK and also from the US. We'd like to have a pot, of thoughts and ideas that we can put into some of the ideas and take out from Thelma. I'd like to ask us a question. We will share this as a question on the chat also. Feel free to share with us. Thelma has mentioned and talked about ways financial institutions can change the space. And I agree with you. This is not a conversation we need to be having 10 years from now. So why don't we collect ideas from all of us? And the question for you is, depending on your context, the country you come from, with the space that you're in, please suggest ways in which financial institutions can ensure capital is directed, or maybe in this space we can say redirected, specifically to women-led businesses across Africa, okay? Suggest ways in which financial institutions can ensure capital is directed or redirected to women-led businesses across Africa. And as you share these thoughts, we will collect them and probably put together an idea, a think tank of ideas from what we've collected from across the continent. Okay, I'll give us about 30 seconds to be able to type that one out so that we can collect that as we go. And soon after that, I will introduce, so far we've listened to Andia, who comes from the development sector, and she's given us some thoughts and perspective. Then we've also listened to Thelma, who comes from the financial space. And as you put in your feedback to that poll question on the chat, the next person we'll be listening to is Shiro Wawero Waithaka. And here we want to get into the voice of the entrepreneur. Yeah. And let's hear from her perspective some of the stories and challenges she's had when it comes to when we talk about financing women in business. So Shiro is the CEO and founder of Fun Kids Limited, and this is a global, innovative, and exciting brand when it comes to children designs. And she focuses on brands and products for children between the age of 0 to 16. And within this space, she's been able to interact with different funding conversations, and she's had experience of many years, not only just as a businesswoman, but also speaking into the space when it comes to changing how we think about women in business. So Shiro, karibu sana, good to see you.
Asante sana.
Feel free to just share your thoughts, and then we'll have a question for you just when you finish.
Thanks, everybody. So as of 2021, I'm also the CEO and founder of Fun Homes. So we've expanded our brand during a pandemic. So we cover adults and children. Just wanted to clarify that. The reason why I don't have any slides up is because I want to intentionally listen. Sometimes when I put up slides, I don't focus, I read instead. And I believe a lot of us are using technology. So kindly follow us on Instagram. We are Fun Homes, FUNHOMES, right? So I love the conversations from Andia, my sister Thelma from Nigeria. I've just had some plantain for lunch, so yummy. We're all one. There's so much data, so much data. My question is, why isn't anything changing? It really, really frustrates me. We talk about financing women, but why do we want to finance women's businesses is the question. Maybe we need to unpack it differently. Not just look at it from a different lens, but ask actually, why do you want to finance their business? Assumption is to help them grow, right? But to help us grow as women, just buy my stuff. Honestly, then I can scale. If all the, how many women on this group? 82. And all the organizations represented literally tonight bought my stock and tomorrow, then I'll be okay. That is financing as far as I'm concerned. But you want me to borrow, I can buy raw material to make a product, then to sell it. But just buy the material and then, buy me the product from me. This helps me scale. I can then access more finance and scale. It's really that simple. We need to start asking, why do you want to finance women? If you enable me to scale by buying more of my product, I can then bring down my pricing. I can then go buy raw material at a lower price. I can then become competitive. If I'm competitive, I grow my business, I hire more people. The domino effect is huge. It's so simple. It frustrates me when people ask me, what do you think we should do? Just buy my stuff. If you're a bank, why aren't I part of your supply chain? I can make office furniture. I can make stuff for you. Why don't you make me part of your supply chain? Women who sits on boards, huge organizations. How many women are actually in your supply chain? We don't want petty money. We don't want tokenism. Don't use us as marker pens. We're so frustrated. So tired of being told, summarize your business in 2 slides or come for an exhibition in a 3x3 tent. No, we are good, not because we're women. We're good because we are good. Women just happens to be how God made us. So this is my absolute honest frustration. So exhausting being used as a marker pen to tick the box. People collect data from us who tell us, but then you're going to use that data to monetize something. So why don't you just buy my things? I'll give you the data. Just buy my product, enable me to pay my rent, pay my bills, buy more machines, scale, employ more people. The end. Let's stop huffing about using women as tokens just to collect data. Buy all the women entrepreneurs on this chat, buy their products, buy from each other. That's my summary. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thanks, Shiro. I think just listening to you, I like the tagline, and maybe you should put it across this conversation. Hashtag buy my stuff. Yeah. And I think again, coming from an entrepreneur's perspective, you're bringing a different perspective.
That not buy my stuff, buy my brilliant stuff. It's brilliant. It's not just stuff.
So we change it. Buy my brilliant stuff.
Buy my brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Okay, put it on the chat for us also as we have this conversation. And when I listen to Shiro, I hear the voices of many women in business who have built themselves a brand and products that are good quality. They're excellent in terms of meeting the needs of the customers. Yeah. And Shiro, I've looked at your products and I've seen some of what you're doing. And I agree with you across board. Over the last about 10, 15 years, where I've worked in coaching and mentoring business women, especially from the startup to what we call this sustainability stage. One of the questions is that you've rightly asked is, if we actually made a focus on buying your stuff, then maybe even the financial institutions and both in the developmental and government sector would be able to help us grow. Yeah. But then also I agree, and I see a perspective on changing how we, it's not just about funding, it's about buying your products, but also there's a gap in between on all the other support women entrepreneurs need, from coaching to mentoring to capacity building for purposes of scale, not just to give you a token experience. Okay, so thank you for that. And I can see your hashtag has taken line on this. And even as we talk about the hashtags, please feel free to use the hashtags that we're using for this conversation as you tweet some of the thoughts. So Shiro,
yes.
Question for you. And I agree with you, you've talked about all these organizations with women in positions of funding. So there are more and more women in decision-making positions at venture capital funds, at the banks, in institutions across Africa. And maybe if they did what you're saying, pushed for an agenda to buy stuff from more women, first it would help counter the bias across businesses and across the economy that are locking out women entrepreneurs like yourself. And I can feel your passion on this. But then maybe just to flip the conversation a bit, do you think there's need to have more women, especially with the voice of the entrepreneur, in the decision-making position in funding institutions? Do we need more women entrepreneurs sitting in those conversations where some of these policy conversations are being held? What do you think about that?
I was really waiting for this question. Who else are you funding? You're funding an entrepreneur, so why wouldn't you have her there? It's simple. She knows where the shoe pinches her. And no disrespect to those who are not entrepreneurs, but on a given day, and I keep saying you should all apply for internships in our businesses. Intern with me for 1 day, 1 week, and you'll understand that I'm not confused and disorganized. You'll understand that every day there are moving parts in our businesses. It's not that we don't understand how to run business, but it's so challenging on the ground. In Kenya, we say qua ground. Come in before you start deciding for us what we need. And then you include us. You talked about not having a space for women, a club, golf club. We are launching the first, launching the first hub for women. We're not even calling it a hub. We're calling it a nyungu. A nyungu is a traditional cooking pot. Meet us in the kitchen as we're cooking our ideas. This is gonna be in Nairobi, but also virtual. It's called the nyungu. It's time, come to us, not the other way, because it's business. You will also make money. We also wanna make money. Let's stop pretending that you're not gonna make money from us. Yeah, you're also gonna make money, but come to where we are. We are wearing the shoe that's pinching. You cannot, from your laptop or air-conditioned office, I keep repeating, understand that we wake up at 4 in the morning and start trading in places that are COVID infested. And you guys tell us to stay safe, hashtag, come on. We need to work, we need to trade. We're doing everything we can to stay safe. The families of the people we employ eat. So let's not be arrogant about this. Include us. Not, it should be a must, it should be compulsory. If any organization writes to me and they don't have a woman entrepreneur on the board, I will literally start calling people out. Because this is not because it makes you feel good reporting to your shareholders, because it makes sense, period. I'm sorry, but that's what it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiro. On behalf of everyone here, we have had you. I'm just watching some of the chats, conversations that are going on. But it's true. I think, like you said, we need to have a roundtable as people who not just support women in business, but people who are partnering in other areas. Like I said, for me, in my coaching space, I've sat down with women who are like you say, we wake up early in the morning to move the cogs of this economy. And maybe we do need, let me use your word, a cooking pot conversation where we can bring everybody's idea and listen to each other. Yeah, and listen to each other with a desire to build better for tomorrow. And if we all build better and buy from everyone, yeah, locally, we create an economy, a cycle of businesses that are supporting themselves and sustaining themselves. So thank you, Shiro. And picking up on what Shiro has shared, we'd like to then invite our last speaker for the day. And this is Lillian Ramba. Lillian comes from 15 years of experience supporting businesses in Africa. And maybe you're the best, or you would be able to speak into this space of how do we then support businesses in Africa. Lillian is also the regional director of Grassroots Business Fund, where she is responsible for the Africa GBF Fund. Lillian, excitingly, is also passionate about finding innovative ways to channel what we are calling catalytic capital to small and medium enterprises, which include specifically women-led and also the broader conversation around African-led businesses. So Lillian, as you share your thoughts, also wrapping up the speaker session for us, I would like to welcome you, and it's exciting to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I think that the great thing about coming last on this panel is so many great things have been shared before. I can make my part of the presentation quite short and sweet because I agree with just so much that has already been talked about, and I'll echo that in my presentation. My goal for today for this session is to really share GBF's journey in the in becoming a more intentional GLI investor, agenda lens investor, with the hope that for the capital allocators that are in the room who are thinking about designing GLI funds or thinking about how to become a much more conscious gender-based investor, that part of our journey can help support that process. If you could please move to the next slide. Thank you. So who is Grassroots Business Fund? We are a global impact organization. We've been around for quite some time. We were founded in 2008 with the mission to support what we call high impact businesses. The businesses that we support are those that are either creating incremental incomes or cost savings to underserved communities. So the genesis of the fund didn't have a specific gender mandate, but you'll see when I talk about the results that it was really interesting to see what kind of results we were seeing when we looked at them from a gender disaggregated perspective. On the right hand of the slide, you'll see just this is the results of the current fund that we're at the end of managing. So we've made almost $50 million worth of investments. This is globally now speaking, into 51 companies. Our companies are super impactful. They've generated over 350 million of impact. Again, we're counting either incremental incomes or cost savings to households that are below $2 a day. And we've also reached over 25 million individuals. Now, the great thing about our companies is most of our companies are operating in rural settings, in sectors where we see high participation of women. Globally, we've invested 2/3 in the agriculture sector, for example. The artisanal sector is also a very big concentration in our portfolio. If you can go back, please. Just keep back on the same slide. Yeah. So the impact that we see there generated, actually half of that impact is generated, the benefits of those are accrued to women. So we're talking about women farmers, women artisans, and women as consumers of the products and services that our companies create. We also saw that as a fund, about globally again, about half of the we invested were women-led funds. So when we were starting this journey, we were actually feeling very good about ourselves. I think we had fallen into the trap of counting women. So we were counting our women farmers, we were counting our women employees, we're counting how many companies that we had invested in, and we're feeling pretty good about our results. But the more we were participating in the GLI space and more conversations were getting amplified, we realized that there's more need to really dig deep into why we were seeing the results that we're seeing and whether or not we can actually improve upon what it is that we're doing. So if you can move on to the next slide. If you can, yeah, thank you. So this is, 2 years ago, we did some soul searching, working with external experts to really try and understand in this spectrum of gender-led investing, where does GBF fall? Now, we know that as an organization, it's going to take a lot for us to be a gender priority investor, but we also don't want to be gender blind. We want to be a gender smart investor. So that's where we actually are targeting to be. When we did our initial audit, again, with the background of these results that came from the counting that we were doing and being very happy about that, when we actually worked with experts, we realized we were somewhere between gender blind and gender conscious, which is actually a very big surprise for the organization and for the leadership. And that is because, the results are sort of by hapstance. They happen, it's great. Women benefited from it, but it wasn't intentional. And this process of soul searching and to try to understand how to be more intentional happened at the right time. It actually happened as we were transitioning between the first fund to now designing our regional funds, our second funds. And so it really gave us the opportunity to fix the future and to make sure that the future really reflects the themes that we believe need to be addressed for us to move forward with SDGs, for us to move forward with the development agenda, which is of course making sure that we're centering women in the work that we're doing. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So you have to click through a few times. Keep going. Yeah, perfect. So I'm just giving an example of what is the kind of unpacking that we needed to do. Now we're looking at the entire investment cycle. We looked at, from sourcing to how we do our due diligence to structuring our investments, the technical assistance and the post-investment support that we're performing, including the measurement of the metrics, looking at what it is that we're currently doing and what should the future look like in order for GBF to be an actual gender smart investor. So this is an example, again, if you're designing your own funds, or if you're thinking about becoming more GLI focused, this is sort of some of the process that you can go through is, how can you be much more intentional in the process that you're creating, in the teams that you're hiring, in the metrics that you're collecting, in the reporting, to ensure that gender is centralized, it's conscious, and that it's been captured adequately in a disaggregated way as part of the organization and part of the portfolio results. If you go next. Okay, and some challenges that we thought about or anticipated as we're going through this process right now is how do we support our investee companies? Again, if we're a GLI fund, we'll likely have requirements for our portfolio companies to also have gender equity and to make sure that our companies are valuing the women that are in their supply chains as part of being a gender-lens investor. But how do we do that without creating onerous requirements on our companies that already are dealing with a lot on a day-to-day basis? So how do we think about supporting our clients? How do we think about addressing the issues of unconscious bias that we talked about on the call today? One thing, for example, that when we're doing our internal audit, we realize, whoa, hang on, that's interesting. Different teams within GBF at different times invested in different kinds of companies. So whenever we saw there's a period of time where let's say we only invested in male-led companies, we looked back into the teams to try and understand why did that happen and why were some teams more likely to invest in women versus other, and how do we address that appropriately through gender bias training. Again, we talked about the ideas of sharing, documenting, publishing success stories as a way to provide a counter story to why we should invest in women. There's a lot of data that's out there, But I think data alone doesn't always convince. Some people need to be convinced by stories to really be able to put the context behind the data that we're seeing. And again, echoing Thelma's comments, is ultimately we're talking about women, we're talking about people's lives, we're not talking about numbers on a report. And then lastly, again, as an organization, how do we think about differences across the region? Women, we're not a monolith. An Indian woman is not the same as an East African woman, not the same as a Latin American woman. So how do we think about designing appropriate products, structures, support that are respectful, that are responsive to the different regional and cultural differences that we see across the market? So this is sort of the thought process that is ongoing right now as part of the design. But again, echoing what my colleagues have said previously, I can design the best GLI first-in-class fund. If nobody's investing in me, this capital is not going to flow to women. So I'm doing my part, but I think we also need to amplify this discussion so that the capital allocators that we rely on to be able to support women can respond, and it can actually, we need people to write some checks so that we're able to do what is required to do for us as a people, as a continent, to move forward. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you for your presentation and your conversation. One thing even as I just ask you a question, I'm able to pick to that is you have deliberately, and I've seen it also on the chat, there's a deliberate and conscious effort by your organization to pick up a future look, to move from where we are and start thinking and asking themselves where we are going. And it was interesting, even the discoveries you are able to make from your own research and statistics about just being able to find yourself and define yourself as gender smart. So question is, when you think of women, and even from the conversations we've had today, and women entrepreneurs, especially startups and SMEs, seem to, from many different perspectives, need a tailored support that links them directly to the skills that are required to access finance, which then they can use to grow strategically. And then the fact is that investors continue to point out the lack of capacity among women entrepreneurs. And even as we've heard from the speakers before, despite numerous data, training, capacity development programs, there seems to still be a disconnect between skills and finance. So question is, with the years and the conversations you've had over in this space, what's your experience? What in your experience do we need to change in skills development for women entrepreneurs across Africa? What's this one thing that we can change that will unlock the access to capital? Building on what Shiro said, buying from their businesses, what else do we need to change to unlock the access to capital for women?
Perfect, thank you. So I'm actually gonna address this. I'm gonna push back a bit on the question, okay? But I'll address it because I think the issue of, yeah, we need capacity building for women, that's true. But I don't believe that's the only reason, that's the only thing that's stopping from capital flowing to women, okay? So let's talk about the capacity building component first. Yes, women are different from men. That's a bit of an obvious statement to make. And it all goes back down to, from my perspective, is who do you have in your teams when you're designing these capacity building programs for women, okay? You need to have representation in your team that will allow for the nuances to be addressed in your training section. So for example, and again, some of these are, they're not going to apply to everyone, which again which is why diversity is key. But are you thinking about things in your training, like, is there onerous travel requirement that may prohibit some women from participating in your training? Are you asking women to take, big chunks of time out of their business, out of the other additional responsibilities that they have to attend the training? That may also be a barrier. Again, in your training, is there a lot of homework assignments, take home, additional stuff that needs to be done out of the classroom, expectations for networking? Again, that may not be appropriate for some women. Again, I know as soon as I say one example, I'm going to get two counter examples of why that's not always the case. Again, thinking about learning styles. Is it a safe space for women to talk, to share ideas, to not feel like they're being judged? Are you thinking about that in the design of your technical assistance program? Who is leading this technical assistance program? Is it somebody that has credibility in the face of the women that you're trying to target? Again, I'm not saying you only have to have women trainers, but whoever it is that you have needs to make that connection with the women with whom they want to train. Okay, so we can address that through training, but ultimately they're allocating the capital actually understand their quote unquote customers. So are you able to speak the same language? Are you any preconceived notion of whether or not they're, we talked about this, riskier than, let's say, a male applicant? We need to address the barriers as well from the capital allocation point of view. We need to fix both the supply and demand, I guess, part of the equation, in order for there to actually be a flow of capital.
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you for that feedback and response to the question. And I think that opens a whole new conversation also when we talk about financing women. From all the speakers, what we've listened, what we've had is maybe we need to shift. Let me use a word used. We need to begin having a more deliberate future look when we talk about this space of investing in women and financing women in business. Like we had earlier, there's a lot of statistics that says financing women is not necessarily risky. There's evidence that they do get to pay. We've heard that it's not, for some people and some women, it's not a capacity issue. We are ready, we've got the capacity and just access to capital. And the questions, Lillian, you've asked could be important questions to deal with that space. We've also had maybe a different perspective on financing women in businesses, actually to buy from their businesses. So as we come to a wrap up, we'll just throw one question to just a second. I would like to just say thank you to the team, to Andia, to Thelma, to Shiro, and to Lillian. Like we said at the beginning, this is a conversation starter, and we want to be able to build this conversation beyond today. As we come, like I said, as we come to a wrap up, I'd like to just invite us, all of us, to share what's your one takeout, yeah? What's your one thought? What's your one reflection? We've been seeing some of them coming up on the slide, on the chat as we went on, but what's the one thing that you've learned, or what's the one thing you're going to do different going ahead from today, okay? So share your thoughts. What's your one takeout? What's your one thing you're going to do different as we go today, from today? With that, ladies and gentlemen who've been able to join us on the call, I'd like to thank you very much for being able to change this space in terms of planting a few seeds. And using Shiro's analogy, we are being able to create a pot on which that we, as a team, we as partners, people who really are interested in seeing capacity for women grow over the next decade, a pot that will be able to have ideas that we can build on. As we come to the end, I'd like to just pass back to Dr. Aswani for his closing remarks, and then he will also guide us on what next beyond this conversation today. Dr. Aswani?
Steve, thank you very much, and appreciate your time to come and moderate this really interesting conversation. And as Steve correctly puts it, this is just the beginning. Our vision at AVPA is to build out a strong network of influential, not just women, but friends and people with an interest to achieving gender equality on the continent, to make sure that we are moving the needle on this particular topic and this particular issue. So to that end, this is where we're starting, and we're trying to see how we can bring the right players around the table, you know, or around the nyungu, as Shiro calls it, in order to make sure that we're making strides. And as someone has asked in the chat, you know, what are the actionable things we need to be looking at? This is the beginning of where we can need some action. And I think what's most important for us and for most of us playing in this space is, where do we start looking for the small wins? So we're hoping that this is the beginning of a conversation between you and us. We're purely enablers and facilitators. We want to bring out the best in all of you. Anything we can do to support your work, bring together resources where possible, mobilize thought leaders, and try and create opportunities for influence, we'll do what we can. So for those of you who don't know, please go to our website and check out our agenda platform, which we set up towards the end of last year. And it's upon which we are hosting these webinars, and we're hosting the last a couple of things you may have followed up on social media around the International Women's Day. And we've been celebrating different women every day to the end of March. We shall continue. So please look out for the stuff that we'll be doing. There's a lot more that will be coming from our direction. But also for those of you who are doing some interesting stuff that you think we could partner with us to try and either scale, create awareness, or support in one form or another, or connect even. You probably are sitting in South Africa right now and you're thinking, Thelma or Lillian or Andia or Shiro said something that I really want to plug into, because it's about also looking at some of these solutions that are working and seeing how we can make them reach more people. And I think it's about us collaborating, and that's exactly what a platform like AVP is about. So Agenda Platform is up and running. It's free to join, so please go in and sign up if you haven't, especially if you're as a social investor. And we'll continue to collaborate and find opportunities where we can plug some of these competency issues that have come up. We can support existing funds, and the genderless community specifically is looking at seeing how we can support female-led entrepreneurs and business on the continent. So let's see this as pretty much we're on the starting blocks, and we shall be deliberate about making sure that we make measurable strides as we go forward. Next slide. I also want to bring to your attention our Dealshare platform, which is a platform designed to connect opportunities, investable opportunities in Africa to investors. And it serves to, too many times we hear this story that there's more capital in Africa than there are investable deals. And investors we talk to say, oh, we don't know where to find deals. So this is a place to make sure that the investor and the investable opportunities can connect. So once again, we opened this up in November. We're listing deals already. We're listing investors on the platform, and we're doing a couple of other small bespoke events behind the scenes, connecting investors to each other so we can increase co-investment. And this is a super exciting thing that we're working to improve and grow on the continent. We want to emulate what's been done in our Asian sister network. They've got a really successful platform, and we believe we can create one for Africa too. Next slide. And just on the Dealshare platform, you can look for grants, debt, or equity. It's not just debt or equity that you can find on the platform. And lastly, for those of you who are not aware, we did a social investment landscape mapping study last year and launched it in November 2020. It's on our website. Once again, if you're looking for insights on trends, players, policies, gaps and opportunities, outstanding research questions that we still need to answer, all of this is available on the website. So please go under our value hub and you'll find our landscape study. We're grateful to our donors, and especially the United States Development Foundation, USAID, who are big supporters of AVPA, without whom would not be here today. So really grateful to Timothy and his team for the work that they've done to support AVPA. Next. And for those of you who want to get in touch, Joyce is your main contact, and I want to thank Joyce, Abu, Nancy, and Toyin and the team for the work they've done to not only pull this together, but also make sure that we got good quality speakers for today. And to the panelists, once again, extremely grateful for your time and your insights. As I said, this is just the beginning of the conversation, but we need to move from conversation to action. This is a decade of addressing the gender equality challenge, and we believe we have a good base upon which to build upon. And lastly, I think the next slide, I just want to thank our broader group of supporters. who have been working behind us to make sure that we can move forward and we can do some of the stuff that we're doing right now. And please, we're very open to continue to discuss this particular topic, and this is just the beginning. But broadly, we look at issues around social investments, and we look at, we're sector agnostic, we're country, we're Pan-African in presence, so any place that we can support to continue to address these challenges, we'll be very happy to work with any of you. We're very proud also to recently have brought on board 5 women onto our board. For those of you who didn't know, prior to last month, we had an all-male board of 6 people. We've just brought in 5 women onto the board, a big achievement for AVPA, and this shows that we're not just being compliant to this subject, we're being committed as well. So we'll continue to make progress in this end in many other ways. So to everyone, thank you very much. Joyce, do you have any closing remarks?
Not really, Frank, but just thanking everybody for joining, for being with us, and to the speakers, especially for those great insights into the gender space and especially gender lens investment. I think we've all come out with something, and we all know that we need to support each other first before we look external, because literally charity begins at home. So thank you very much for joining. And if you've been following the chat, I've just put some links there where you can engage with us. You can join our agenda platform. You can check out the Dealshare platform as well, and also look at the landscape studies. And if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with any of the speakers, you can get in touch with us, or and we'll be able to connect you. We are trying to encourage partnerships. We are trying to encourage, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in this space. We are trying to just make it bigger and better and relevant. So thank you very much, everybody. A recording of this webinar will also be available. You should get it very soon. And if you don't, please feel free to reach out for the same. Thank you.